Okay, there it is. I got the sign. I got the live sign. Hi, folks. My name's Herman Trabish. I'm a journalist with a national online outlet called Utility Dive, and I also write for another California-centric national outlet called California Current. I'm also a doctor of chiropractic. We cover policy, and this panel is going to be saturated in policy questions. We also touch on cutting edge technologies, and this panel is going to be filled with those. We have some terrific people here, and we are going to discuss the future of vehicle to grid technology, which is often referred to as V2G. This is a really important subject in the electrical vehicle world. As we add more electrical vehicles to the grid, they're going to have to charge on the grid, and they're going to have that charging is going to have a lot of implications. And the folks that we have here with us today are going to be able to tell you a lot about what those implications are and what we're going to do with those implications. There's concerns about the grid, about all this charging that's going to go on the grid, but there's also tremendous opportunities in front of us. And the concerns are related to what we've been seeing recently in California, at least, on blackouts and overstressed grids. But the opportunities are also about those things and how electric vehicles can be a solution for those things. So it's going to be a really interesting conversation. I'm here with my pandemic beard, which has become my significant other in the last few months. I'm about an hour northeast of downtown LA in a high desert home that I rent from my friends at Carousel Ranch, who provide therapeutic horseback riding for severely handicapped children. I'm going to introduce you to the other folks that theoretically you see on your screens right now. But I just want to say a little bit about each one as we introduce them. And I'd like them to tell us a little bit about who they are, their companies, their associations, their work. And I'd like you to tell us a little bit about where you are socially distancing from. And we're going to start with Jacqueline Piero. Is that right, Jacqueline? Give me a nod. Piero? Okay, good. She's VP Policy for NUVI. And she is a policy authority. And what I'm told is that she surveys the policy and regulatory landscape and market structures and energy ecosystems. That's what I've been told that she does. And I'd love to hear from you, Jackie, to tell us a little bit of what that all means.
Sure, thanks. I work for NUVI, and we actually have an aggregation platform that is meant to coordinate, control, and optimize electric vehicles into highly distributed aggregations that can be coordinated to the benefit of the grid. And we know that EVs, just like other DERs, have varying regulatory requirements for their interconnection and operation, depending on the geography in which you're operating. And so what I do when we're looking to enter a new geography is understand the regulatory structures that are currently in place, both for EVs and for distributed generators, but then also for market access for individual small resources as well as aggregated resources. And also, what are the actual pain points? How is the energy system evolving in terms of both resources and how the system is being operated, both at the distribution and the transmission levels? And what business opportunities and models arise from that for our company? What are the barriers for us to operate? What can we change? And what are the deal breakers?
Right. Yeah, that word opportunity is going to keep coming up over and over in this conversation. Jackie, I see behind you the bear flag. So I'm assuming you're social distancing somewhere in California, and probably like the rest of us in California, live in the glorious life of a cigarette butt and an ashtray. Where are you?
I am in San Diego, actually, but I'm up on a hill, so I'm largely above the smoke. But I think I'm pretty lucky. Most people are sitting in a cloud of smoke right now.
Ah, are you excited about the Padres?
I came from Ohio, so I'm a long-suffering Cleveland fan. But any baseball is good.
Ah, okay. Next, we have AJ Perkins, who's president of the Instant On and DR Microgrids, and he's an advisor to the Clean Energy Alliance in their demand response task team. And I think that is going to be a big subject for us to discuss. AJ, tell us where you're social distancing from and a little bit more about your companies.
Sure. I am located currently in Southern California, originally from Hawaii, born and raised. We've been here in California for about almost 5 years, and our company Instant On is a microgrid integrator, and we basically look at the best ways for us to create resiliency for families, communities, and businesses. So in the microgrid space, it's a huge opportunity for us to integrate V2G into not just the large fleets, but for us specifically when we look at being able to integrate them into senior communities and whatnot. So those are the things that really kind of drive us is the resiliency aspect of microgrids and being able to integrate all of the many technologies that can help create a better grid, both from the nanogrid side on the home all the way to the macro grid, which is our utility.
And where in California are you?
So we're in Southern California.
Are you somewhere where there's breathable air? Let me put it that way.
Yeah, we do have breathable air. I think we're right in between, the ashtray and the smoker. So we're right in between exactly what you're talking about. So I count my blessings, that's for sure.
Great. Okay. And third, we have Vic Burconak, who is the founder of COVID Systems and COVID Manufacturers Genius, which is a solid state smart electrical panel and electricity hub. Actually, as I understand it, the first smart electrical panel, if I understand you correctly, Vic. So tell us where you're social distancing from and tell us more about your technology.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Herman. Pleasure to be on this. I currently reside in Ontario, Canada, working in an area called Mississauga, which is just beside Toronto. And what our company does is, yes, you're absolutely right. We have developed the world's first solid state AI, if you want to call it, we say actionable intelligence panel with the intent to replace the century-old breaker barrier panel that we've had for many, many decades. We specialize in microgrid, nanogrid applications, serving as a microgrid controller, providing optimization and resilience and complete transparency for the consumer, as well as changing the way electricity is delivered and consumed for advantages for both the seller and the consumer. We also were one of the first companies in Canada to embark on EV charging. I think we were one of the first to install an EV charger here in Ontario, dealing with GE and a few other companies, and now progressing to operating the largest DC infrastructure within Ontario. And a few years back, we pivoted to integrated solutions because we saw a massive opportunity to use our core technology genius to be able to provide the continuity and cohesiveness where electricity is concerned, to be able to have the control needed to minimize infrastructure costs, provide interoperability, provide what you said earlier about asset management and control for EV charging through an open type platform. And currently we panel serving 7 countries around the world, and with offices in Israel and here in Canada.
terrific. Thank you. That's a technical piece that I'm going to ask you later on when we get farther into the conversation to explain a little bit more about. But before we do that, I want to introduce the other member of our panel, who is our special guest star, a star of the silver screen. Zan Dubin-Scott is the co-founder of National Electric Drive Week, which I have said probably has put more butts in the seats of electric vehicles than anybody else in the country. She says Elon Musk, but who's Elon Musk compared to Zan Dubin-Scott is my answer. Zan has been involved in the electric vehicle industry and an advocate for electric vehicles for a very long time. That's how she became a star of the silver screen. Zan, tell us a little bit about how your early participation and how you became part of the cast of a movie.
Thank you, Herman. I'm so happy to be here and to learn from you all. Actually, yes, I am in Who Killed the Electric Car, but trust me, if you blink, you will miss me. I was largely behind the scenes as a co-founder of Plug-in America, doing a lot of the protests and advocacy and such. But my claim to fame here, I'm going to say, is having worked with Tom Gage. I hope that name rings some bells. He was an early V2G guy, and he also pretty much helped develop the technology that made Tesla possible, and that was in the T0, which I am really honored to say I've been driven in. It was the predecessor to the Tesla. So by day I do public relations, and that's how I work with Tom. And I would just say that I've had my own nanogrid, I guess, since about 2002 when we got solar on the roof, and I've been driving electric since then. So, and I've been waiting to SIP, use my EV to SIP since then. So I'm excited to see where all this goes.
Great.
Or be sipped from.
Thanks, Zan. So there you go. And Zan's also going to give us sometimes some thoughts on from the driver's point of view, because this is all very technical and very policy laden. And so to come back, the first thing is, what is vehicle to grid? We haven't really defined it, Jackie. And for me, the first thing that I think folks have to understand is vehicle grid integration, which begins with managed charging, which just begins with connecting to the grid, and then V2G, which is vehicle to grid. And I wonder if I could get you to talk about both of those and how they fit together, just the basics of what we're talking about, and then we'll go to some policy questions about why aren't we there? Why isn't Zan getting sipped from? That sounds vaguely pornographic, but we won't get into that now. Go ahead, Jackie.
Vehicle grid integration, it's interesting. There are policy groups all over the country that are continually debating exactly what should be included in that definition of that term. For myself, though, I would say that it means getting away from looking at electric vehicles as something that needs to be added to the grid and whose presence need to be mitigated, and rather looking at them as a piece that fits in with all of the other evolving pieces of our grid, be that solar, be that controllers, be that any number of load control technologies, and actually optimizing the grid using them. How do they best benefit the grid in addition to not causing problems? So, we just wrapped up the VGI working group in California that was trying to address how best to actually make vehicle grid integration a reality, and started looking at every single use case you could possibly imagine, and trying to understand what is the value, what are the policy barriers that are keeping these things from happening? Is there, as you were saying, a progression from managed charging to V2G? And I think we came to understand that it's not necessarily going to be a linear process. There are going to be some market segments that move immediately to bidirectionality, some that it's never going to make sense to do that, actually. So again, I think vehicle grid integration is going to be the process of finding out how best to integrate and frankly exploit an EV in a particular use case.
What is managed charging, first of all?
Managed charging is simply controlling when and at what rate an electric vehicle charges the battery. There can be different applications of that capability and different ways to get there. You could look at a person simply deciding when to plug their vehicle in based on a time of use rate as managed charging. Or you could look at it as a company like mine, taking very nuanced decisions based on the load of the building and the output of various other resources on the grid as inputs of when and how to charge that car.
And then what vehicle to grid comes after that? What is vehicle to grid?
Vehicle to grid is it's a blanket term that starts with the capability of the combination of the car and the charger, I mean the EVSE, to not just charge that battery and use it for driving, but also discharge that battery back to a load, a house, further to the grid when requested for some reason. So you could look at it conceptually as the car just becoming like a stationary battery and discharging when requested. But those other terms about vehicle to load, vehicle to vehicle, vehicle to building, they all start with that capability to discharge the car.
Okay, and I want to get that's a really important thing for us to hear from the other panel members about. But I want to just ask you one more question before we do that, which is what are the barriers, just in the simplest terms, what are the barriers that we're facing in confronting these new ways of dealing with electric vehicles?
If we were to talk about V2G specifically, I look at the barriers in 3 buckets that need to be addressed anywhere that we try to work. That's regulatory identity, meaning what is a vehicle to grid capable EV? Is it a controlled load? Is it a small generator? Is it storage? Is it some other heretofore undefined type of resource? Not having that understanding, I've generally found, leaves you in a regulatory no man's land. And when you're in that gray area, it becomes very difficult to actually operate that vehicle. And you don't know what you're allowed to do. And so very often on the electric grid, that means you're allowed to do nothing. Once you know, for instance, I generally advocate that V2G should be considered storage, just like a stationary battery with some nuances. Once you know that, everything dovetails from that, and you understand how you would be assessed for capacity, how you might be taxed on energy that you're buying and selling back, what aggregation rules might apply, and how you interconnect. And interconnection is the second bucket. And that just means the utility, the distribution utility that's running the poles and wires in your area has to approve, having determined that as a small generator, you meet all safety requirements, and in California, all smart inverter requirements, to be allowed to actually plug into their system and discharge your battery. Up until a couple weeks ago in California, there was no clarity on how a utility would interconnect, would log that resource. Now we have a Public Utilities Commission decision that V2G should be considered storage, and that gives the utilities a procedural and an administrative and a documentary pathway to follow through their own systems to actually allow this thing to be plugged in and legally discharged on their system. The third thing, once you're allowed to do that, is what do you do with the car? What are the value streams? How does the metering work? What market access can you have? Are you allowed to be part of a demand response program that already exists? Are you allowed to actually be registered with the transmission system operator as a demand response resource for situations like we had a few weeks ago when we had rolling blackouts? Are you allowed to actually work as an aggregation? Those are the things that I think constitute the permission structure to actually be able to use these as intended.
Great. Okay. AJ, the interesting thing about what Jackie was saying was that in order to use this tool, this opportunity to use the vehicle and its battery, you need to go through all these processes, regulatory approvals, interconnection, etc. On a microgrid, you can use them and within the microgrid. And so you bypass a lot of those problems. Tell us how that works. And because another thing that Jackie mentioned early on was how electric vehicles are just another DER, another distributed energy resource. So your microgrids have many DER, distributed energy resources, and you're using them. You have microgrids operating, doing service without any of those approvals because you're closed system, so to speak, in some senses. So tell us how it works and tell us how it is working.
Thank you, Doc. It's really nice to be able to have somebody understand the intricacies of how the microgrid can take something that's so complex and really simplify it. And kudos, Jackie, that was just unbelievable. I mean, I could have sit here all day listening to you talk. So this is really, I'm honored to be here because from the microgrid standpoint, we're not just V2G. V2G is one quiver in our entire packet of opportunities to create. And, we're fortunate, we have Vic with us as well from Coben, and Vic specifically gives us one of the hubs that we on our side, Vic has the Genius panel, but Vic also helped us create the IO hub, which is our microgrid controller. And exactly like you said, we've been able to take this disparate systems of solar, fuel cells, battery, vehicle to grid capabilities, all of these different things, and we were able to package them into something really simple of a microgrid. I mean, that is like classic Hawaiian. I mean, I'm telling you, like that's all Hawaiians do, right? I mean, take the complexity out of life and just relax and hang loose. And that's really what we did was we took something that was so complex and we made it one entity that faces the utility. By utilizing our IO hub or the Genius panel, we take all of these different systems that normally would just create chaos for a utility, and we've given them one product that says, here it is. Here it is. What do you want? You need power? Okay. And then now our intelligence, and it's not my intelligence, I'm telling you, I'm Hawaiian, right? We just enjoy life. But the intelligence of the smart people that help create this, they're able to sit there and say, you need power. Are we going to give it to you from solar? Are we going to give it to you from our fuel cell? Are we going to give it to you from our gas generators from our vehicle? So we take all of this confusion that is traditionally associated with these DERs, these distributed energy resources, and we let the intelligence really control what that looks like for the utility. And quite frankly, it actually makes it easier for the utility. The utility doesn't have to decide, how am I going to accept this? When am I going to accept this? When do I go ahead and put them into a demand response or, or into a net metering scenario? That the utility doesn't have to do any of that. It's the system that creates all of the smart algorithms that they do to create the intelligence that says, I'm going to go ahead and dispatch my power into the home or the building now because it's cheaper than buying power from the grid. Or I'm going to go ahead and take, expensive power, and when it's cheaper, I'm going to start storing the power in my vehicle or my battery, or just do different things that allow us to really create a much simplified version of resiliency.
Okay, resiliency is something we got to talk about a lot, but before we move on to Vic and get the most technical picture of how that happens and the difficulties in making that happen, before we get there, I want you mentioned earlier that you're going to create, or you're in the process of designing or building a microgrid system in which you're going to give everybody in the microgrid an electric vehicle. Now, what if somebody in that microgrid wants to drive its vehicle and it's not charged? How do you take care of that?
So, first and foremost, the project in itself, we were selected to build nano grids, residential microgrids for 1 million homes for veterans. And this project was just beautiful because their charge to us at Instant On was, AJ, we need resiliency. We need to make sure that these veterans never experience the type of chaos related to power outages, rolling blackouts, public safety power shutoffs, all of that stuff. Let's create some consistency in their life. So when we did that, we brought a lot of these beautiful technologies into it. Our IO hub, our Genius Smart Panel, fuel cells to support the solar that's on there to give them redundancy. And as we continue to look at this, in actually working with Nuvi, Jackie's company, they actually told us their main target market are buses. And we're like, really? Why is that? V2G, come on, it would be cool for the home. And they said specifically, well, we like buses because they're big batteries and they sit longer than they actually travel. And we're like, wow. And me just being a smart aleck, I said, that sounds like my mom. Right? She'll just buy the car and just leave it sitting because she doesn't really go anywhere. She travels like from her house to the grocery store and back, and then the rest of the day it's, so when I thought about that, we continue to take this veterans project forward to the point where, say, if we built a community for seniors, we could actually give Nuvi their target market. It may not be in a bus, but we've aggregated all of these electric vehicles. And we said, instead of trying to play games and say, hey, here's the vehicle you should buy. If I could bundle that into a brand new home, come on. Can you imagine buying a brand new home? Why wouldn't you have a brand new car with it? It's just a simple thing. So by bundling this package, your home and your car and the intelligence around it is bundled into a really nice ecosystem that's connected to the other neighbors. So now we've created this connected home, this connected community, and now we've been able to really monetize that. Now, when you talk about, okay, how do we know what's going on as far as the different things that the customer is experiencing? When we install the IO hub or the Genius panel, we prioritize loads and we give them the ability to really control the experience. So even though there's a lot of intelligence that happens behind us, sometimes there's things that happen that kind of put us into different scenarios. So we can actually make the decision based on priorities as far as, when the incentives are really high, start dumping 20%, 30%, 50% of my power into the grid so I can monetize that, right? So it's not just a matter of saying, dump all of the power. When I can go ahead and integrate an electric vehicle into our nano grids or microgrids, I can reduce the size of the battery that I put on the property. Right. So traditionally, for our veterans project, we actually put 40 kWh of batteries in there. That's like 3 or 4 Tesla Powerwalls in a home. That's ridiculous. But I made sure these people never go without power. And we're also going to monetize that battery by selling it in a demand response program or whatnot as an aggregation. I can do the exact same thing with these electric vehicles. Shrink my battery in the home, use the electric vehicle as part of that system, and then give the consumer control. It's a very customer-centric ecosystem. And that's the whole thing that we need to do is the utilities and all of us DER integrators need to create a better ecosystem that is really customer-centered.
Okay, and just to make it a very simple point, when that car is going to the battery or going to the power of the home or going to the grid eventually, that's the V vehicle to grid or to power, right? It's that simple, right?
Correct.
Except of course
Absolutely.
it's not simple at all. It takes a genius who has a genius to figure it all out. And one of the things that AJ kind of mentioned in passing, Vic, is that the system has to know. If I'm somebody who has to go to work and leave for work at 5 a.m., the system has to know I have to leave for work at 5 a.m. But I might be somebody who doesn't go to work. I might be a banker or somebody who doesn't go to work till 9 a.m. And the system could use my power, if I'm a banker, but not use my power if I'm a reporter or something. So your technology, that's just a very simple example, because it also, your technology has to know how to use all these other DER, right? And how to manage. I can't even grasp it. This is the black box for me that I've often thought of. So tell us what you can. Try not to lose us in volts and hertz, but
Yeah.
but tell us what you can about how that works.
Yeah. Wow. I know I have a tendency to my passion and exuberance gets me going, but our system, unlike other systems, we don't rely on the individual or the front end to do certain things or make decisions or do actions to achieve an outcome or a result. So we spent years and going through every possible combination to develop algorithms in a system where it is holistic as well as agnostic, to be able to perform actions, as AJ said, based on preset parameters in accordance to an occupant's lifestyle. So this is very, very important. So when we look at an electric vehicle, we look at a stove, we look at battery, solar, to us, it's either an appliance / load, or it's an energy resource, whether it's a renewable resource or the grid. We can positively manipulate and set predefined actions that occur based on certain states throughout the day, whether it's monetized or not. We can do it all. So the reason why it's called genius is because it actually is so smart that it allows energy to be defined based on time, price, and availability. And when we specifically talk about V2G, we believe, according to an industry expert, which happens to be me, by the way, but we believe to take that and invert that process, rather than leaving the decisions, as AJ mentioned, on the utility side, give the granular information to the premise owner or to the piece of equipment that can take that information and create an action that our system can respond to achieve the desired outcome. We have so many options and capabilities. Back in about 2007, we were working with GE in the GE Smart Grid Lab within Israel, and we developed a way to actually switch the state of our breaker. And we've had this now for quite some time, to have it as a source or a load. So in certain applications like DERs, microgrids, we can take the output of a battery or solar, pump it into the breaker, switch it to a load, and redefine where that energy goes within the environment. Or if there's excess, sell it back to the grid. One of our major milestones last year was getting regulatory approval both in the US and Canada for utility grade metering on a disaggregated basis. So every load or every circuit can be defined with the dynamic pricing. So when we talk V2G and in the years to come, we believe and we see this will play a very important role in terms of that so-called stationary battery on wheels, taking that energy, monetizing it in comparison to the other resources within the premises, as well as the grid, to be able to create all these actions that optimize and provide that resilience to allow a utility to be involved, to allow the consumer to be involved, and both from a non-intrusive perspective. So,
can I interrupt there on that word,
Yeah.
non-intrusive?
No,
Yeah.
non-intrusive.
If you don't
Yeah,
mind.
I was,
I
was
love
just-
it.
Because, as an electric car advocate and a solar advocate and all of that, and as a just human being who believes in stability of the grid, of course, this is all very attractive to me. But I'm imagining Edward Snowden, in his dark Moscow apartment with his head exploding because, the utility is monitoring, the size of my battery, my time of use billing, my work schedule, when I need to drive. So, I mean, I'm probably way overgeneralizing, but I imagine that consumers will have questions like this.
Absolutely. One
Right.
of the things based with priorities, you can assign 1 through 5 levels of priority in accordance to your lifestyle. Okay, which you define as certain loads as being the most important down to the least important. Even though the utility can have visibility to that, you have visibility to that, but the action occurs with those available energy resources based on the priorities that you have set for your premises. So
the consumer's in control then, is what you're saying?
yes, as opposed to Vic is the utility. I'm telling you, between 3 and 5, I'm shutting off your air conditioner. Well, we all know how that works out. So, because the system can compensate other resources, again, based on those priorities, to allow that energy hog to work at those peak times by readjusting the other loads, as Jackie and others have mentioned, load management, demand response. And one of the reasons why utilities and companies have failed in demand response is they did not have the technology and the infrastructure to allow the transparency, visibility, and control to achieve sophisticated demand response capability. That's a whole other discussion, by the way.
no, I want to talk about demand response. That's a great thing to segue to, but I just want to go back to what Zan said for one thing to you, Vic. Another feature of what Zan was raising was cybersecurity. How do you protect the consumer's information in that situation?
Well,
I'm going to get to you, Jackie. Hang on. But Vic.
Yes, we have a few ways. Through an agreement through the consumer, where the consumer is allowing to release that information. There is certain information that, with the utility involved, naturally through regulation is available to a utility. More specifically, when we talk about security and cybersecurity, without getting into our intellectual property too much, the way we design our system is unlike other programs where and devices where they house an IP address, making it susceptible and a window or a point of entry. So we've done certain things, developed certain things that disallow that, that absolutely 100% prevents that. The data is stored within the panel for a period of 1 year and infinitum in our servers. So those servers can be housed in a utility, in a solar farm, battery storage acting as a utility, such as a company like Instant On with AJ, or us. So, through privacy rules and laws, we have to abide by that and follow those, in accordance to the laws. But we've taken extra precautions to
Well, Jackie,
mitigate that.
Jackie, are those extra precautions satisfactory? Isn't that a major subject of a policy, or maybe has been? I don't know. Is it settled? Where are we on that?
There are two levels to security, to cybersecurity, when we talk about the kind of technology that we're discussing. The first is personal information. And, if you're working in Europe, for instance, the GDPR standards are going to be change the way that you actually have to deal with the customer's information, the customer's right to actually revoke their permission to have you hold their data, and how the data is held, how it's anonymized. I'd be happy if that actually got adopted more broadly in the United States. But the fact of the matter is that right now, even with OnStar and other tracking mechanisms in cars, no one really wants to be holding the information about where your car is and when it's there. And so the automakers that are working with cars, and then their caution sort of ripples out with the other entities that are working with cars about what kind of data you have about a person's car. You're more likely to be using meter level data, which, as Vic was saying, people are already giving that kind of data to be involved in demand response programs. And that just has to do with, I'm registered as a resource, as part of a big aggregation, and that kind of anonymizes it to start with. But when we talk about cybersecurity, actually, the first question I get from governments, it may be the UK, it may be California, is what if you get hacked? If you are running a platform that is actually operating millions of cars across our system, can you guys accidentally be the doorway that takes down our electric system? And how are you going to stop that? The answer is, that's not the way the electric system works, that you would actually have a hack move from an EVSE up into the system. But the second question is, what if we, as the system operator, the distribution utility or the generators get hacked? Can you guys, as a distributed intelligence, help us be more resilient from that? Can you actually, for instance, recognize that something has gone terribly wrong on our system and not react to a request from a system operator? Can you guys actually block yourselves from being affected by some sort of command that appears to come from a system operator? We can do that. The more we operate, the more we'll be able to recognize a false command, for instance. But again, that's why microgrids are also going to be a really important part of this, because they're able to actually section themselves off. And so this, both distributed intelligence and these independent large entities that AJ and Vic are talking about, are actually, I think, going to be really important to the resilience of grid as cybersecurity becomes a bigger and bigger issue.
It sounds like there is vulnerability, but there's also opportunity. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah.
Doc, do you mind if I chime in?
All right. Now, no, please do.
I want to chime in based on some of the things that was, discussed with Vic and Jackie, as far as, protecting the customer, right? I think that's what we all care about. I mean, I can tell you right now, my wife wouldn't let any of this stuff happen if she was vulnerable. She will be the first one to shut this company down and every other company out there. So, that's number one, is protecting each and every individual and their ability to make these decisions, right? So I can say from the microgrid standpoint, when we build our microgrids and we put our IO hub as the entity that faces the utility, they see what I tell them to see. We prioritize the loads so that we know what's priority based on the intelligence to be able to make the decisions. If the utility sends out an event that says we need to curtail because of demand response, currently they send out an event response, and that means my AC, because I'm participating, they shut off my AC. That's absolutely ridiculous. I live in California. When it's 110 degrees, this Hawaiian does not function properly, okay? So do not shut off my AC, right? But when we look at being able to integrate the IO hub with priorities, they'll actually send out an event call to all of our IO hubs, and it says, reduce load by 10%. Guess what? My coffee machine gets shut off, my microwave gets shut off, all of the non-essentials get shut off. And then once I hit the 10% threshold that the utility has asked for in reduction or curtailment, guess what? I get what I'm supposed to get from the revenue or incentive portion. And most of the time, I don't even affect my daily living. So that's one huge aspect. As it relates to being able to protect the client, I'm able, because of the microgrid environment, they don't know whether I got a 50 kWh battery in my house or a 5. They don't know what type of vehicle I have because my IO hub says, you need power. I'm going to nominate X amount of kWh to put into the program to pay me. So whether I put 5 or 50, they don't know whether it's a combination of solar, fuel cells, natural gas generators, you know, my EV, whatever it is, it's none of their business. And quite frankly, they really don't care. What they do care is, I cannot have brownouts. I cannot have all of these spikes. I cannot. So if I help them, they're going to allow me to continue to play nicely in this environment. So I think that's the big thing when we look at nanogrids and microgrids, intelligence, and all this other stuff. If we just do this responsibly, everybody can play nicely together.
Can I add one thing to what
Yeah, thanks, AJ. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
absolutely.
AJ is spot on. And you know, when it comes to V2G and battery storage and solar, the barriers and complexity today, we have so many different options available through connectors, chargers. Are they smart? Are they dumb? Are they OCPP? Are they proprietary? So we need a basis of unified communication. And that's what, you know, further to what AJ is saying, is what we provide from an agnostic and holistic perspective that can take the option or the opportunity of V2G to flourish in the coming years. And because AJ said, you know, it doesn't matter if that's a 22 kilowatt hour vehicle or a 100 kilowatt hour vehicle, because everything is defined in advance for curtailment, and it's taken from the available resources, you know, that everybody's installing solar, battery, and next big one is, you know, the vehicle battery.
And, you know, there's no reason why these principles that AJ and Vic are discussing can't be applied to the average connection to the utility. Hawaii actually has a really innovative, for the United States anyway, way of doing distribution build out, so that the utility just looks at the connection size, says we trust that the people behind that connection will stay within it, and that's it. And that would allow your average business, commercial, even a house, to be able to control their own loads, their own resources, and have the utilities actually be freed from a lot of the chaos that they're managing now. This is my dream.
Well, Jackie, your dream has come true because we can provide that to that extent.
Legally, we need regulatory changes to be allowed to do that. Unfortunately, you know, in California and a lot of other places, the way the utilities have to actually assess load doesn't allow us to do these new technically innovative and commercially proven solutions. And so, there are a lot of rules that need to be changed to actually make this a more common thing, I think, outside.
We should have a discussion, UL regulations and
I
all that. Yeah. Go ahead, sorry.
I got to take the floor back, Vic. Excuse me.
Yes,
I don't
yes.
mean to be rude. Zan will tell you, we did a panel earlier this morning, and I kept trying to get to demand response, and I never got there, and I had to apologize, and I promised everybody we're going to do demand response this time at 2 o'clock. And we mentioned it several times. Really, we've been talking about demand response the whole hour in one way and another. But we haven't defined it, and we haven't talked about the regulatory barriers. I got to say that it was mentioned earlier, I don't remember who said it actually, that demand response, it hasn't worked. The old demand response didn't work, but during this recent blackout, what we found out was the kind of stuff that Jackie's been talking about, and what AJ, the aggregated DERs provided some really significant input to the grid to help protect the grid. Some of the big providers, STEM and Cisco DeVry's company, which I'm blanking, Ohm Connect, did some really important things. And if there had been some regulations in place, the kind of things that I'm going to ask Jackie about right now, they could have provided twice as much protection. They might have actually been able, demand response might alone have prevented some of the blackouts if those rules have been in place. But Jackie, it's exporting the energy. It's that piece, isn't it? That's a problem, and it's exporting the stored energy from batteries. There are technical issues, but just on the policy side, isn't that a factor that's limiting V2G from providing the kind of demand response it otherwise could? Isn't that correct?
Once you've interconnected the car, meaning once you have permission from the distribution utility, SDG&E, PG&E, to actually discharge that battery, you're allowed to do it. But what you need then is the market in place to actually organize you to do this. You need the request to be able to come. Yes, you could do a flex alert where it's just a broad request from the system operator to cut as much usage as you can. It's much better if they can actually be going to a demand response provider like Leap or Olivine or someone else and say, we need 50 megawatts from you. And they can actually then go to each one of their customers that has a V2G car and say, this is no time to shine, guys. I think once you're actually allowed to be paid, to be compensated, to be called, to be aggregated, this can definitely work. We just don't have those structures in place yet to be organized for it, in my opinion, but happy to hear other opinions.
Right.
Doc, you mind if I jump in on that?
We're really out of time.
All right.
We only have a minute left, but go ahead.
So as it relates to the demand response, when we are able to integrate batteries, it doesn't matter what battery we're talking about, we run into challenges because when we respond to demand response, we use our microgrid to island the entire building. So we maximize the benefits to the utility as well as to the person that has the building. So that right there from KISO, that is where we had the challenges of being able to do that. So it doesn't matter where the battery is, whether it's a in-home battery or a V2G scenario. I think that's where we're looking at the opportunity of how do we utilize that, because demand response is curtailment and it changes, right? We're looking about sending power back, which is a whole different scenario.
Right. Well, but that's V2G. But we don't have time to. I mean, we could spend another hour on this easily, but we're out of time. And so, but what you said, AJ, brings us back to what Jackie did at the beginning, which is that in some senses, V2G is the electric vehicle as a DER, and doing all the things that we can do as we go through this incredible energy transition that we're all living through. and discovering enormous opportunities and capabilities from the technologies that you guys are all in one way or another providing. My clock says we're out of time. So I want to thank you guys. It's been a tremendous conversation. I really have enjoyed it. I've learned a lot. And it's been a great thing. I still don't know how to turn this off. Zen, did they tell me how to turn this off the last time? I don't remember.
Can't tell you that, but there's one thing I want to say, and that is aloha.
Hello, everyone.
Oh, aloha. Here, here.
Forget about turning it off.
Take care,
Let's just keep going.
I don't, but we really have to go. I'm feeling fine, but I've got a helicopter coming for me to take me to my local hospital because I heard that's an opportunity that all Americans now have. So I've got to get off this call.
Thank you.
So thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was great.
Bill,